regularly scheduled meeting of the Community Development Committee of the Metropolitan Council for August 4th, 2025. I'm Councilmember Robert Lilligren, Chair of this committee, and we have a quorum of the committee here, so we can get right into our agenda. I do want to note and welcome that this is the first committee meeting for Councilmember Victor Abisakan, yes. Abisakan, I'll get it correct. So welcome here, and we're very excited to have you join this committee. Look forward to your contributions and participation. Thank you. Committee members, I'll start with the Dakota Land, Water, and People Acknowledgement. The Metropolitan Council acknowledges that the land we currently call Minnesota, and specifically the 7-county region, as the ancestral homeland of the Dakota Oyate, who are present and active contributors to our thriving region. As part of the Metropolitan Council's commitment to address the unresolved legacy of genocide, dispossession, and settler colonialism, and the fact that government institutions, including the Metropolitan Council, benefited economically, politically, and institutionally after the forcible removal of the Dakota Oyate, the Metropolitan Council is dedicated to instilling land, water, and people commitments in regional policy. These commitments support the Dakota Oyate, the 11 federally recognized tribes in Minnesota, Ho-Chunk Nation, and the American Indian communities, representing over 150 diverse tribal nations that call the 7-county region home. Great. So, calling this meeting to order. The agenda is in front of us. Committee members, if there are no objections or changes recommended, we'll consider that approved. Approved. We have an agenda. Next on the agenda is the approval of the Community Development Committee minutes for July 7th, 2025. Is there a motion to approve, please?
So moved.
Thank you. And thank you, Council Members Morales and Chambliss. Any discussion, additions, corrections? Hearing none, all in approval, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries. Committee members, our consent agenda is next. We have 2 items on the consent agenda, and I would entertain a motion to approve, please.
So moved.
Thank you, Councilmember Morales.
Second.
Thank you, Councilmember Carter. Any discussion? Discussion on that? Hearing none, all in approval, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That carries. Now we are on to our 2 non-consent business items. The first is item 2025-182. It's approval of the 2026 Regional Parks and Trails System Visitors Study, contract number 25P041. And we have Ismael Ramirez here to present. Welcome, Mr. Ramirez.
Chair, council members, thank you for having me tonight. I'll be happy to present the 2026 Regional Parks and Trails System Visitor Study, contract number 25P049. The Park Visitor Study is an important part of the position of the park principal researcher. Additional to that is the use estimates. The Park and Trail Visitor Study is a rich source of data as we collect information through intercept surveys, data about who is visiting our regional parks and trails. We look at their demographics, usage pattern, group size, and their experience. The results of this survey are used in several key purposes, and the main one is just to fulfill the statutory requirement for the funding allocations. It also informed the multipliers for the annual use estimates, more specifically vehicles and seasonal, and it also helped us planning, understanding the equity analysis, and the agency decision-making. All this data is provided to our regional park partners. And for example, the last completed park survey was done in 2021, and as a result of this survey, it revealed disparity in access and experience across race, income, and ability. And continue these studies will help us ensure that the data is consistent and we're measuring progress and see and will inform also the investments. We sent out an RFP, request for proposals, on April 16 of this year, and we had a strong interest. we had a total of 28 plant holders. 14 of them were MCOPs. And we received a total of 5 proposals, and I apologize for the typo. It says 6, but we actually received 5 proposals, which were reviewed by an evaluation panel made of council and regional park agency staff. The panel evaluated based on qualifications, technical approach, personnel, subconsultants, service delivery, and the price. We concluded and selected Wilder Research, who also conducted the 2021 Park and Trail Visitor Study. The proposal stood out for several reasons. They demonstrated a strong methodological rigor, including their sampling and data cleaning approach. They had a solid plan for engaging underrepresented populations through oversampling and focus groups. And they bring a long track record of successfully completing similar work, both with us, the Met Council, and also other public sector partners. For equity and budget, the contract with Wilder is not to exceed $1 million, and this is funded through the 2025-2026 community development budget. Also, Wilder Research has met the Met Council goal of 10% MCOPs by selecting New Publica as a subcontractor. This work directly advances the core values of Imagine 2050 by equity, by centering in inclusive data collection, accountability, by meeting the state statute requirements, and also stewardship by supporting data-informed decisions for equitable funding and planning. And for that, slide number 5, recommendation. The recommended action is to authorize the regional administrator to negotiate and execute the contract with Wilder Research for an amount not to exceed $1 million to complete the 2026 Parks and Trails Visitor Study.
Thank you, Mr. Ramirez, for the report and for your work on this. Committee members, questions on this report or this recommendation? Yeah, Councilmember Chambliss.
Thank you, Chair. I don't really have any questions, but I did want to thank the Met Council team for putting together so much information on the evaluation process, the panel, and pricing, ratings. All of that is very helpful for council members to see.
Agree. Mr. Ramirez, I do have a question, and it refers back to the slide 2. But, I understand we had 6 proposals received. We have 28 plan holders. What does that mean? What's a plan holder?
Yes, Chair. A plan holder are the people who initially downloaded the request for proposals.
Okay.
So are all the people that had in hand the RFP and at some point perhaps considered submitting a proposal.
Thank you. I think it's the first time I've heard that term, so thank you for the definition. Committee members, any other questions? Questions? Otherwise, Mr. Ramirez has recommended that we authorize the regional administrator to negotiate and execute contract number 25P041 with Wilder Research to conduct the 2026 Parks and Trails Visitor Study in an amount not to exceed $1 million. Is there a motion? Thank you, Councilmember Carter. Second.
Second.
Thank you, Councilmember Chambliss. Discussion on the motion?
Chair?
Yeah, Director Barajas.
I just wanted to thank council members for their additional investment in this process. We've previously had a much smaller budget, which is why you never saw this come before you for action in the past. It was within my signature authority. But expanding that budget allows us to do more in-depth conversations, focus groups, and reach a broader audience as a part of this work. We know that the information is really valuable to our parks implementing agencies, and as you all know, and as Ismail mentioned, it really helps us track against those values in our regional parks policy plan as well as in Imagine 2050. So we're really excited about this larger process and being able to do more with that with a larger investment. So
Thank you, Director Barajas. Very excited to see the results of the survey for sure. Any further discussion on the motion? Further discussion? Hearing none, all in approval, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries. Thank you, Mr. Ramirez. We'll move on to our second non-consent business item. It's item 2025-183, local forecast changes prior to system statements issuance. And we have Mr. Graham. Todd Graham's here. Mr. Graham, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll just stand up over here. Yeah. Mr. Chairman, I'm Todd Graham. I'm the principal researcher in Council's research office. I presented to a committee of the whole proposing the local forecast set for Imagine 2050 back in December, and that product was adopted on February 12 this year, as it was included as an appendix to the Imagine 2050 regional plan. And now I'm back with this housekeeping item that you have in your packet. It's Council Action 2025-183, and this will be a quick action if you like. I mean, it's up to you,
committee
right?
members.
So for the benefit of those who missed the December presentation, this is the context. Met Council is assigned by Minnesota statutes to forecast population and households and employment growth, and we prepare a forecast set that answers when and where, how much growth we expect in specific places. And this matters because Met Council and local governments are involved together in systems planning and infrastructure provision and services delivery. So our wastewater systems, for example, connect to one another, the regional and local systems, and our MnDOT county and city road networks all connect to one another. And so we have an expectation that the regional planners and the local planners are working from the same expectations, the same numbers. There we go. So this is what Met Council requires of local governments with respect to forecasts. First, we require the cities and townships to plan for future growth as detailed in the local forecasts. Second, we ask them to prepare a land plan, and in that land plan, they should provide for local land supply or redevelopment sites an analysis that at least accommodates the forecast. I want to emphasize at least accommodates, because we're not stopping any urban or suburban community from guiding more land than is really necessary to accommodate. Third bullet on here, our system planners use the forecasts as service level milestones. So when we publish forecasts, our water resources plans, in our water resources plan, the cities take that as an assurance that ES division will bring the system capacity to serve those numbers of population, households, and employment. And that brings us full circle to the bottom of the slide. The growth forecast and the plans should fit together, and if they don't fit together, one or the other can be adjusted. Right. So you're now up to date with the front matter and the progress of this, and the local forecasts do have this force of policy and are an element of the regional development guide. So for either a local government or council staff to adjust a local forecast, it does require bringing it to you for CD committee and full council's action. And so this is the action before you today, forecast adjustments in 2 cities. It's just 2 cities. Council staff have met or corresponded with several cities, not just these 2, regarding local forecasts, known development pipelines, and the fit with local plans. And in the course of those discussions, the cities of Corcoran and West St. Paul did request that we adjust their forecasts through the proposed action. So there are other cities we talked with, and those are preferring to wait and see. Yeah. So let me talk about Corcoran and West St. Paul first. In the case of Corcoran, Corcoran is in the west end of Hennepin County, west of Maple Grove, and its new home building is now at a historic peak level in the current decade. There are new subdivision developments underway. or mostly certain to kick off. And those are, the city expects to add about 1,000 housing units in just the next 5 or 6 years, now to 2030. So that was foremost in their minds. And we also talked with Corcoran about post-2030 development. That's a little more speculative. We did come to a compromise on expanding their forecast expectations and spreading the adjustments across all 3 decades. The forecast that you approved in February was expecting 5,000 households as the level in 2050, and now we're upping that by an additional 2,100 households. So this is a lot of growth for Corcoran. This is the city tripling in size in the course of this planning period. In the case of West St. Paul, the adjustments are mainly in the current decade. They've had more growth kicking off in West St. Paul than was previously expected. They described that to us in their Housing Redevelopment Environmental Assessment Worksheet earlier this year. The forecast you approved for West St. Paul was 11,000 households by 2050, and this is just adding a small number, 200, to that 2050 number, but it's making larger adjustments earlier in the time frame, more growth in the current decade, the decade right now. Yeah. So, are these the only local forecast adjustments? For today, yes, these are the 2 we're bringing for the present action. We encouraged a few other cities to consider forecast changes, and those preferred to initiate their request later through local comp plan amendments. So at least one of those amendments we've actually seen. It's submitted. It'll probably be on your agenda in September. So those will be coming. I think some of the city planners considered that they had a little more, for whatever reason, they wanted to be more intimately involved in the forecast change. Finally, the last part of this slide, there's some cities around the White Bear Lake, Lakeshed, northeast and southeast of the lake who would enjoy expanded forecasts. Council staff are not prepared to do anything with those requests just now. The reasoning is that local forecasts, as I said at the top of the presentation, they represent a planning authorization and our institutional commitment, Met Council's commitment to bring infrastructure and services to the places that have future growth. So some cities would like the authorization expanded. They'd like Met Council's commitment expanded, but there are groundwater supply issues surrounding White Bear Lake, and those have been elevated as a policy issue. Council's environmental services staff are working with the cities to analyze and plan for future local groundwater supply. So while that proceeds, we think it would be premature to greenlight more growth in those affected communities. So we're not going to greenlight more growth than we already have in Imagine 2050 and in the city's respective plans. Okay. So the last thing I'll remind is that we're never really done with the forecasts maintenance. There are tweaks. Council staff are willing to negotiate or revisit the local forecasts as needed, and on screen are all of the varieties, points in the cycle where we can engage with the local governments about their forecasts. And this is, this willingness to adjust is it's an acknowledgement that the future is conditioned by plans. Our plans, their plans, and plans can change. So local plans for land guidance provide the information we use to understand what is allowed and what is possible and what fits in a community. And it's very possible that local plans will change during the preparation of their 2050 comprehensive plans. So those will be a lot of the changes that you see in coming years. If land plans are being substantially revised, we can work with cities on a revised local forecast. And Mr. Chairman, that's my presentation. I'm here for questions, and you have the action item for your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Graham. Questions on that report? That work? Any questions? Question? Yeah.
Yes.
Councilmembers Abiscan.
Thank you so much. For living West St. Paul, I'm just curious, I was looking at table 2, it says the total units needed, 165. Is it you or how did the city come to that number of households? How did they come to that number is my question.
Mr. Graham.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
She is not looking at me, so.
Okay.
What a friend.
Okay. Yeah, we do have an affordable housing need analysis that comes up with the affordable housing total for the entire region, and then there is a process of allocating that to.
She's raising her hands now. Thank you.
Hi, hello, council members. I'm Maya Guerrero-Combs with the Housing Team and Community Development. So yeah, we look at the forecasted growth for the given decade. And we look at that at the regional level, and we determine how many households will have incomes at 60% AMI or lower. And then we distribute that to all of the sewer serviced households in the region proportional to their forecasted growth. We do adjust it slightly depending on their existing affordable housing stock, as well as the ratio of low-wage jobs to households. So, for example, if a city has provided a lot of affordable housing and they have a lot of affordable housing at those different affordability levels, they get a slightly lower, right, part of that pie of the region, or slightly higher depending on their existing housing stock. And then we do kind of, we come up with that total city level number and then break that into AMI bands depending on the forecasted growth of households in those AMI bands. So we go, okay, out of the 100,600, or sorry, I'm going too far, out of the 39,700 households who will have incomes at 60% AMI or less, 50% of those will actually have incomes at that deep affordability level of 30% AMI or less, 35 at 51 to 60, 12% at 51 to 60. And so then we apply that to that total number for the city and then also adjust that one a little bit. So for example, I met with City of Little Canada today, and they have a lot of 30% AMI housing, so they didn't have as much in that 30% AMI housing pot. So it all gets adjusted based on what cities currently have and what they're doing. Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Great question. Yeah, further discussion, Councilmember Lee.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Graham. I have a question that probably goes into the weeds. When cities disagree with our numbers, do they cite some other authorities' data sets like, I don't know, the State Demographer's Office or like permits pool, or how does that work exactly?
Mr. Graham.
Well, the cities can bring us their argument directly. The state demographer has no authority in this chapter of state law. The state demographer really doesn't serve this part of the state. Met Council provides the official forecasts for transportation planning and land planning and housing and other regional systems. Now, if your question is specifically about West St. Paul and Corcoran, we looked at the known developments and developments that are in the pipeline and are expected, and they were each of them asking for slightly higher forecasts or an adjustment of the staging, the timing of that development. And we take what they give us usually at face value. I think the usual disagreement that we have with cities, I'm going to make a generalization, the usual disagreement we have with cities is if they have a lot of land supply and a lot of places that could be developed. Not everything is going to be developed. The region isn't going to be fully built out by year 2050. There are a lot of places that will still have undeveloped land. So it doesn't all happen in just this 25-year time frame.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Further discussion on the report, Councilmember Carter.
Thank you for the report and for the work that you all have been doing with cities in this process of approving the local forecast or understanding concerns that may exist with the local forecast, and for your having laid out the opportunities for additional adjustments down the road. I am, I guess this is my third year on the council, and I have seen revisions to the 2040 plan through almost the beginning of the 2050 plan. And I am just wondering how conclusive our calendar is. You know, and specifically, as you look at the system statements, they will all be out then by December of this year. By September. They will all be out by September, so that that process for reviewing and comment ends then by December. And I'm expecting then that that appeals period also concludes at the end of December. And then if they are appealing in that system statement section, that's over. And then the last appeal would be if they were going to, in their comp plan update, make a comment and request adjustment. And you have that going through 2034. So the expectation is that we're going to see those plan adjustments potentially through that period and or beyond. And my question is, if we anticipate that it will go through and conclude at that time, what are our safeguards to ensure that we're not adjusting that beyond?
Mr.
Mr. Chair and Councilmember Carter, I think I said we were never done maintaining and adjusting this.
Did you say that? All right.
Yeah, yes. So I mean, you know, weirdly, we had a city this summer that just submitted its plan update 7 years late, and they asked for a small forecast adjustment, and we accommodated that. It was a very small forecast adjustment. I think the odd situation right now is that Met Council has adopted a set of forecasts that might be that are different from what cities have in their 2040 comp plans. So as you see plan amendments come, for example, I alluded we're going to have an amendment from the city of Bayport next month. They're going to be asking for a slight adjustment to the households and employment numbers in Bayport, and you will, as a council, be asked to authorize that forecast change in both their 2040 plan and the same forecast change in the Imagine 2050 forecast set that's on Met Council's website. So yeah, we are in this this in-between period where Met Council has forecasts that could be different from what cities have in their plan updates. But by the time we get to the end of the plan update cycle, then we're all working from the same forecasts again.
Okay. Thank you. That does become abundantly clear that it is a process we will be working through.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Graham, can I ask you please on the, excuse me, timeline slide, there's on the fourth box down, 2026 to 2028, there's an asterisk, and then it doesn't direct anywhere. And so I was just wondering, I feel like you just filled in what's missing there, but yeah, if you could, please.
Right. The footnote
The
fell
footnote.
off. The footnote would probably say that Minnesota statutes 473 expects cities to have their plan updates done by 2028. But
The reality.
some might be late.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. Thank you. Further questions or discussion on this report? Hearing none, Mr. Graham has proposed 4 actions relative to revising local forecasts for Imagine 2050 for the cities of Corcoran and West St. Paul. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Councilmember. And thank you, Councilmember Biskin. Thank you. Any discussion on the motion? Discussion. Hearing none, all in approval, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Graham. And committee members, we have concluded our business items for today. We do have 2 information items. The first is the 2050 Comprehensive Planning Technical Assistance Overview. And we have Emma Dvorak and Jillian Greenberg here to present. Oh, and Angela Torres as well. Welcome.
Thank you, council members. Good to see you again. I'm Angela Torres. I'm the Senior Manager of Local Planning Assistance. I'm here today with Emma Dvorak, Senior Planner in Local Planning Assistance, also District 11 Representative, Sector Representative, and the Project Manager of the Local Planning Handbook and many of the projects that you'll see today. Also with us is Jillian Greenberg, Senior Climate Planner. She'll be giving a demonstration of one of the very exciting tools that we'll be working with local governments on. And so just wanting to provide today an overview of a myriad of different technical assistance tools that we are working on to implement 2050 with local governments and provide that level of technical assistance that local governments expect from us here at the council as part of this process. Well, I did talk through most of this already. I'll start by introducing to some, but also expanding on the sector representative program and some of the other technical teams that will be providing some guidance and development for, working through the local planning handbook. Emma will talk through all of those things. We'll be talking about the planning assistance grants and the small communities planning program in our second information item, so I'll just give a very brief touch point on those 2 items today, and then talk about the Planet program, which is one of our training and educational formats that we provide for local government staff as well. So I couldn't talk about the suite of technical assistance programs without first starting with the sector representative map. The sector representative program is one of the most important programs and most visible programs that we have at the council. It's also one that is ongoing and continuous. The sector representatives not only work with local governments and local planning staff, but also with yourselves as council members to provide technical assistance to communities as they're working through various planning issues. We do so more targeted during the comprehensive planning process. So we're the key contacts. We serve as liaisons for all of the local government staff, anything that they might need with the Met Council. We also work through any amendments, not only the updates, but the amendments through the regular course of the cycle, but also environmental reviews and other questions that local governments might have. So the planners on the local planning assistance team have also led development of regional land use policy, which is cross-divisional work, and so we work very closely with the teams across the council that work to support local governments in this way as well. So after the last round of comprehensive plannings, we conducted kind of an survey and engagement, like postmortem sounds a little bit morbid, but like after the fact analysis of how the comp planning process went, what went well, and what could we do better. And that was called the 2040 debrief. And through that, there were a lot of comments about our internal technical responses, a lot of ask for consistency in our comments, and the need to have technical reviewers from a similar work unit providing similar types of comments for plans across the region. And so consistency being one of the key takeaways there. And so we are working on a training program internal to the council staff, primarily the technical reviewers. We have already done a great deal of that work. We'll be kind of tailoring what we have already done for the 2050 planning process itself. And then, of course, as new staff come on board, we'll develop an onboarding piece of that and then refresher. Because as Todd was talking about, it's not just kind of a one date and you're done, but it's an ongoing process. And the comp plans come in over a 3 to 5 to 7 year time period. And so just keeping that refresher on board. We're just looking for shared understanding internally of what we're trying to provide to local governments, better ways of communicating, and of course being very efficient and transparent in what we're doing there. Met Council staff are also initiating review and analysis to address updates to several of our programs and administrative guidelines. This would include the plat monitoring program. You'll see that in some upcoming agendas as we start to kick off an update to that long-held program where local governments will be able to, based on their actual built environment, gain credit for some of the good development that happens at higher densities than perhaps the minimum, which our planning process is really bound to. So working through that, working through some other updates that do inform land use and density requirements, and then we'll further update a process for preliminary plan reviews. We like to give communities a heads up on any red flag items that might lead to conformance issues or concerns about consistency with council policy, and we like to do that as early as they are ready for us to do that. Doesn't have to be through a formal submittal, but a more informal process. That isn't necessarily time-bound according to statutory timelines, but something that we work on with local governments organically. We're also looking at updates to the actual comp plan review process, looking for ways to be more efficient, looking for ways to streamline a process. Process is heavy throughout this time period. The comp plan updates is very intensive, so it's once every 10 years. Comprehensive plan is very comprehensive intentionally, right? So it covers a lot of different topics, a lot of different technical areas, and a lot of different requirements, not just from the council, but from other agencies, watersheds, the water supply plans and other things as well. And so just working to update and look for ways that we can make that more efficient where possible. I'm going to turn it over to Emma now, and she'll have all of the fun stuff. This was a little bit more mundane, but Emma will have more information for you here.
Thanks. Good afternoon. My name is Emma Dvorak. I am a senior planner and local planning assistant and project manager for the Local Planning Handbook 2050 update. I'm supported in that role by staff from all over the council, including communications, information services, research, and environmental services, just to name a few. The Local Planning Handbook is a one-stop shop online resource for local communities to access tools, data, and resources that will help them build out their comprehensive plans. The Local Planning Handbook provides important community-specific information, data, and resources for local governments such as growth forecasts, affordable housing need requirements, sewer allocation projections, and several required maps. It also supplies an individualized checklist that is unique to each community to help them track their progress in updating their comp plan. The Local Planning Handbook is undergoing a complete update to align with Imagine 2050 and is scheduled to launch at the end of August 2025, this month. The Local Planning Handbook project kicked off in fall 2024. The team began by evaluating how local planners use and experience the current version of the website. Staff utilized the findings from the 2040 debrief, that postmortem, to understand what worked well for a local planning community and what areas of improvement had already been identified. With the help of CD Research, the Local Planning Handbook team was able to observe and record local planners as they completed activities on the existing site. We also interviewed users about their work environment, preferences, and most valued resources to help improve further website improvements. The Local Planning Handbook is comprised mainly of two main areas. One is plan element pages and the other is community pages. Plan element pages serve as a landing page for each required plan area, such as land use, transportation, and wastewater. Plan element pages contain the minimum requirements for each plan element area, as well as resources and information on how to complete those requirements. Based on feedback from local planners, Met Council staff realized that while a variety of resources and guides were available on plan element pages, users often struggled to locate information, were unaware of certain tools, or uncertain of how to use them. This highlighted an opportunity for the council to make resources easier to access and more visible throughout the planning process. One of the ways that we've achieved this is by creating an interactive table on the website that allows users not only to explore minimum requirements by their individual community or topic area, but also immediately see what resources or support are available to help them achieve that requirement, whether it's a tool, a fact sheet, or a guide. We tested this feature with local planners, and the results have been overwhelmingly positive. When the website launches at the end of August, these pages will be populated with resources intended to help communities go above and beyond to achieve the minimum requirements. In addition to toolkits for climate, natural systems, and housing that we're highlighting some of later in this conversation, Environmental Services will be publishing a step-by-step guide to meet the water supply requirements. Transportation will be launching an interactive mapping tool that will be a great resource for communities to utilize to achieve the 2050 Transportation Policy Plan goals, and all of this will be accessible through the Local Planning Handbook. Another key element of the Local Planning Handbook is community pages. Through community pages, local planning staff are connected with information that is specific and tailored to them. Each community page, all 188 of them, contains forecast data, the community system statement, a complete individualized checklist of minimum requirements, and maps that are specific to and centered on that community. Based on user testing and feedback, we have reorganized the content of community pages so that local staff are able to easily locate the information that they need to get started on their comprehensive plans. We also made all maps and tables downloadable with one click and added a regional map feature that allows communities to view their data in context with the systems around them. The minimum requirements checklist is among the most critical resources that communities will encounter on the Local Planning Handbook. The language of minimum requirements is often technical and specific, and it is important that communities have a clear understanding of what is being asked of them in order to have an authorized comp plan. To evaluate the clarity and accessibility of minimum requirements, local planning assistants convened 2 focus groups to review a draft of the requirements, one for developed and one for developing communities. Focus groups were comprised of both new and experienced planning professionals, including consultants. These discussions helped ensure that the new requirements were aligned with the Imagine 2050 regional vision, the requirements were clear to communities, and that any gaps in available tools and resources have been identified. I'll now highlight just a couple of the tools that are going to be on the site. So for the next round of comp plan updates, we'll have requirements for stewarding natural systems consistent with the goals of Imagine 2050. To meet these requirements, we are providing technical assistance in the form of a mapping tool, a story map that provides context, case studies, and examples of natural system strategies that cities might choose to pursue. The mapping tool provides the needed spatial data and will guide the communities through exactly how they can fill the natural systems minimum requirements. Another tool that we have for the 2050 cycle that the housing team will be developing is a toolkit which allows communities to connect their housing needs to possible tools and resources, including policies, programs, and fiscal devices. The toolkit will include considerations for implementation, local examples, best practices, as well as identifying possible challenges that a community might encounter. The toolkit will also connect communities to Met Council funding sources available to help with implementation. The Met Council housing team will also be creating an interactive data tool as well as supplemental data, including historical trends, downloadable charts, and explanations of how the data can be used to determine housing needs. So that's the toolkit. I would now like to introduce Senior Climate Planner Jillian Greenberg, who is going to give us a demonstration of the greenhouse gas strategy planning tool.
Great. So Like Emma mentioned, I'm Jillian, and I'm going to be covering some of the new climate tools that we'll be rolling out as part of the local planning handbook to support communities this comp planning cycle. And climate is one of the areas with new requirements this cycle that are based on a statute update in 2023 that required the Met Council to address climate in the regional development guides and requires communities to address climate in their comprehensive plans. So the GHG strategy planning tool is a tool that is specifically designed to help communities meet the mitigation requirements on the climate side. So looking at greenhouse gas emissions, an inventory of those emissions, and how they can reduce those emissions. So the tool will provide an inventory for each community, and you see an inventory on the screen here. These inventories show how across an economy in any community, greenhouse gases are either emitted or sequestered. And this gives communities a sense of where across their community and across their economy they might want to direct their action because those areas are more greenhouse gas intensive. So before going further, we're going to jump into a demo of the tool itself. I want to note this tool is still in development, so you might notice some kinks that are still being worked out. There'll be a beta version launching with the local planning handbook at the end of the month. And while I'm the one in front of you today, there's a whole team of researchers behind this tool who've been doing a lot of great work and will be a part of future presentations around this tool and demonstrations as it rolls out. So we're going to be looking specifically at the building energy sector today as part of this demonstration, and we're also looking at the city of Eagan as an example. So that's where all these numbers are coming from. But in the complete tool, there will be sectors focused on land use, building energy, transportation, natural systems, waste, and agriculture for communities where that's relevant. The tool at any sector starts by describing the sector and why it's important. So in this, with building energy here, we have a description of the sector and also some context setting information. So here we see housing data that's pulled from Met Council's local forecast data to give communities a sense of where they're starting. After the intro, they're going to move into a section that shows the emissions projections from this sector before the community takes any action. So the requirements for this, for greenhouse gas projections, have communities look out to 2050, which is what you see here. And you'll notice that emissions in building energy are already declining through the next 25 years. And this is in part because Minnesota has a clean electricity standard that requires utilities to provide 100% carbon-free electricity by 2040. So in the chart, in that blue section, that's electricity emissions, you see that in a pretty significant decline over the next decade and a half as we move towards that 2040 target. So this is before any action has been taken by the community and gives them a sense of where things are headed. Next, communities can select how they may take action. So in the demo, we're going to look at the retrofit existing building energy strategy. And here you see how users can select how they might want to approach this action. They can either select a button you see here from no action to high levels of action, or they can specify a custom target. They can also set a timeline for their project, and that they'll see the change in emissions projections in the chart on the side as they run the tool looking at different scenarios. After they've gone through the different strategies, they'll get to a summary panel for the sector. So this is a summary panel for building energy. It'll show how the strategies they've selected combine to reduce emissions across the sector out to 2050. So this is just showing the results for that retrofitting homes strategy that was selected. And in each strategy, it shows some activity-specific data relevant to that sector. So for building energy, we see electricity demand and natural gas demand. For transportation, you might see vehicle miles traveled or some more relevant data for that specific sector. At the end, there are also data tables and a summary panel of information for communities, and they'll be able to download the information by sector, and there'll also be a final report at the end of the tool that they'll be able to download so they can easily use this data and bring it into their comprehensive plan. So that tool is really focused on helping communities include an inventory in their plan and greenhouse gas projections. But there are some additional climate requirements, including ones focused on adaptation, and the Climate Action Toolkit is the other new tool that will be rolling out this cycle to support communities in doing comprehensive climate planning work in their plans. So this tool is really in response to feedback that we heard from local governments at a Climate Action Planning Summit that happened in December of 2024. We heard from local government staff that they wanted a resource where there were vetted strategies that they could go look at. They could see some examples from the region so they would know if there are peers that they could talk to about that strategy, as well as who in the region might be partners that they could reach out to if they wanted to implement it in their communities. So the Climate Action Toolkit is really intended to answer a lot of those questions for communities. It will cover actions related to greenhouse gas mitigation, and it will also cover actions related to adaptation, like extreme heat resilience, food systems resilience, and localized flooding. So that's a tool that'll roll out in 2026, and I'm sure we'll be sharing more updates about it as it goes along. But with that, I'm passing back to Angela.
So, as I mentioned, we are going to have a little bit broader conversation about planning assistance grants and small communities planning program in a few minutes, but I did want to give the committee an update of where we are in looking at those two programs. The Land Use Advisory Committee started reviewing the eligibility criteria for this next round of comprehensive plans in January, looking at not only eligibility criteria recommendations, but consideration for different award categories like sewered, unsewered, counties, or consortiums, looking at various funding scenarios, the overall budget considerations, and then options for incentive programs. The focus of their analysis has really been on community population and net tax capacity per capita, and focused on priorities primarily to serve as many communities as practical and providing a similar or better level of financial support as the 2040 planning cycle. Again, though, this program and the next program are not meant to provide 100% of support for all of the statutory planning requirements, but to provide a level of assistance that helps communities that may have a need for more capacity, that may be smaller communities that have less planning technical staff on hand, et cetera. So a portion of their responsibilities, but not all of. The Small Communities Planning Program is new and has never been done before, which is what new means, I get that. But LUAC started review of this proposed program in January of this year as well. We've been talking about this program probably since the conclusion of the last planning cycle, though. And the Land Use Advisory Committee is currently working through eligibility criteria requirements or recommendations for that, funding and overall budget considerations, and options for local cost share, because as I mentioned, it's not meant to cover 100% of the costs. The focus is the same as in the planning grants program, net tax capacity per capita and community population, and priorities, again, similar, serving as many communities as practical and reducing the burden of the comp plan update process on the smallest communities in the region, which have the least capacity to manage those requirements. The estimated capacity for this new program is right now at 32 communities, so right around 30 is where we were aiming, understanding our internal capacity to service the program and support the program, and for those local governments to meet the minimum planning requirements. We also have an engineering services component with that, and that's part of the overall program considerations as well. The draft criteria are here. I'll wait to walk through these in the next info item just to conserve time, but we'll definitely have time to dig into this in the next presentation. I did mention that the council always provides an education and training program. That's this Planet program. Was branded in the last round and will continue with this branding for Planet in this round as well. We will kick off this program in 2026 through 2028, really providing technical assistance, technical direction and guidance to local planners. As Emma was mentioning about the minimum requirements checklist, it gets very technical, and that's what these programs are as well. We may very well walk through how we calculate affordable housing, how we allocate forecasts, growth forecasts to communities. So there's a lot of different, very technical aspects of the comprehensive planning process, and we walk through, we provide that level of information, not only for communities to meet their minimum requirements, but to really look at different planning issues, take advantage of this once every decade planning opportunity to get more out of the process for the local government. Whatever local issues they may be highlighting, maybe a community is particularly interested in looking at the impacts of their aging community on their housing production or their housing needs. And we may very well go into some specifics around topics like that for any part of this program. It's not just housing, it's also transportation, it's also the water stuff. So it's comprehensive across all of the different technical areas that we provide different options, whether it be a webinar or workshop. We plan a day-long conference as well. And all of the educational opportunities provide free professional continuing education credits. So it's called CM in the American Planning Association, and so they get free CM credits for all of the things, which can often be quite burdensome for not only local governments to provide that assistance for their planning, their professional staff, but can be, if their employer doesn't cover it, can also be quite costly for individuals to cover as well. We are, as I mentioned, early in the planning process. This program doesn't kick off at the same time. We're working right now on primarily local planning handbook, primarily system statements. Once we get those huge projects kicked off and underway, that's what initiates the local planning process, and then we will be working to start the program we're developing the program right now. We're scoping that out, working with all of our technical teams across the council, but we wouldn't be rolling out events or anything until early 26 probably. With that, we'll conclude and ask if Chair and you and your committee members have any questions for us.
Thank you very much. Thanks for this work. This is very exciting to see, and I'm very much looking forward to the Small Communities Planning Program update on our next agenda item as well. And committee members, this has just been an attempt or efforts by the council to be a better partner, right, in the comprehensive planning process. It's can often be burdensome to our communities, and so developing more and more tools. The local planning handbook updates are great. That planning strategy tool, is that at the online tool? Very complicated, but very cool. And I don't think our communities had anything like this during the last round of planning, so we'll see how it goes. But excellent work to you and to the teams that have been underpinning this work as well. Discussion or questions on that report, Councilmember Carter?
Thank you very much. I so appreciate all that has gone into this comprehensive description of the work that you're going to be doing and assisting, in particular, the smaller communities. I know that having gone through the local planning process a few times, well, not a few. Let me stop aging myself. Anyway, having gone through this process in a community, I know that you are open to all who have questions and that you all field a ton of just inquiries about the process and back and forth with our communities. As you go through this very, very planful process of help, I heard you say, but I lost track probably of the Planet program, that it had existed in the last process. And I am wondering if Planet is a part of the two programs that you described for specific communities, or if it is available to all That's, I guess, the first question I've got about this. I know it'll be huge to make it available to everyone, so is it a part of those grant programs in particular?
Ms. Torres?
Chair and Committee Member Carter, it's not part of the Planning Assistance Grant Program or the Small Communities Planning Program. It is a program that is available for all local planners. Small local governments have attended various workshops, as well as Minneapolis and St. Paul. So it covers the entire region and is available for planning consultants, for planning commission members. We've had a number of planning commission members in the last round that attended from various cities as well. And a lot of the resources that are produced are replicable, and so local planners can provide them directly in their packets to their city councils or planning commission members, their engagement efforts as well. So we try to make it as usable by the local staff as possible.
Sounds wonderful and more than I had hoped for, quite frankly, but thank you. And you addressed my second question,
Great.
with respect to the materials being provided and available for the planners to hand to their staff as well. I am wondering, do we keep this all somewhere so that it's also accessible by others who are looking for this information?
Chair and thank you, Chair and Committee Member Carter. Yes, it is actually part of the local planning handbook, although it won't kick off at the same time as local planning handbook kicks off. It is available on that resource as well.
And I assume that there are going to be questions, sorry, Mr. Chair. There are going to be questions that are fielded during the process that aren't in the local planning handbook. And so are you posting these, good to know tidbits elsewhere?
Ms. Borjak?
Yeah, absolutely. One thing that we've discussed incorporating post-launch of the local planning handbook is a sort of frequently asked questions page. We definitely anticipate that we won't be able to anticipate every question that a community has or have a resource ready right away for everyone. So in addition to having kind of a frequently asked questions that we update regularly with what we're hearing from communities, we're also going to have on the homepage of the handbook a form that shows what new resources are going to be coming out, so what's coming soon, so that governments can also kind of plan their own work. If they know that a resource is coming out in early 2026, then they know to return to the plan book at the planning handbook at that time to get that resource and begin their work.
Thank you very much.
Cool, huh? Further discussion, Councilmember Lidstrom.
Thanks. I imagine many years ago, the local planning handbook was something that we created and then we printed out, and then that's the way it was for a decade. And then we made a new one. I suspect it's much different this time around, and that it's all online and easily searchable, and you can kind of click through and go right to the thing that you're looking for. One thing that I appreciate about Green Step Cities, which is another thing I'm involved in, is that they have 29 best practices, and you can click through those best practices and see what the best practice is, and then you see an advisor, a person with a face, they put the picture up there, with a name, with a phone number, with an email that you can check with to be like, okay, I see what the best practice is. How do I actually make it happen? And it has case studies, et cetera, that you are referring to in the local planning handbook as well. So that might be something to think about. If it's not a name of a person, at least names of organizations that can help the local government achieve the thing that they want to achieve. Are you interested in making your city more walkable? Check out the AARP walk audit program. Here's the website where you can learn more about what that's all about. Things like that. A question, on the emissions aspect of this, they have to utilize our tool and go to the strategy bank which is a term I learned from you. All these different things that they can do to reduce the emissions, and then they actually have to say what that emission reduction is. And is it, the question is, by using our tool, it'll show what their emissions reduction is. And do they have to use that number, or will cities or counties come back and say, actually, our consultant says that if we do X, Y, and Z, the emissions reduction will be such and such? Is there wiggle room with that, or is it like, nope, our tool says that if you do this, the GHG reductions will be such? You know, I don't know if I explained that well, but take it away.
Ms. Greenberg.
Chair and Council Member Lindstrom. I think I understand the question, and it's a good one because we have heard from communities that have done greenhouse gas inventories and this type of emission projection planning work already, and they ask if that work will be eligible and meet requirements through this planning process. And in general, a lot of work that communities have already done in this realm will help them, if not completely meet the requirements, get them close. There are a few key pieces. So in the inventory section, there are certain sectors outlined in the state statute that have to be included in the inventory. The inventories we provide have all those sectors. If they have an inventory that has all those sectors, great, they can use that inventory. If not, we suggest that they use the one that we provide since it'll meet all those requirements. For the projections, it's similar. We're requiring projections out to 2050 because these are 2050 plans. So we see a lot of communities that have projections out to 2035 or 2040 in their climate action plans that they've written. So if that's the case, they can work with that same consultant to project out to 2050 or use our tool to get those projections. The minimum requirement, as we have it written, doesn't require communities to use our tool. They can use equivalent tools, but we provide this tool so that if they don't already have these resources built or don't have a consultant on hand who can provide these resources for them, there's an easy way for them to meet the requirements.
Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion on this part? Councilmember Chambliss.
Well, thank you. Very good presentation, and as was said by our chair, this is something that our committee has really pushed for, and we really appreciate the additional assistance that's being provided. I do have a question, and that is related to the greenhouse gas planning tool for the greenhouse gas mitigation. It's going to go into a beta phase. Do you have an idea of how long that beta phase is going to be? Is it going to be just more experimental, and then we'll see what use you get? How is that going to work?
Yeah. Chair and committee member, that's a great question. We expect the full tool to roll out in January 2026. And so this beta phase will be, it'll roll out with the local planning handbook at the end of the month. It won't include all sectors at this stage. It'll have some of the sectors, and it will show local planners what the tool will provide. If there are certain sectors, like we expect the agriculture sector won't be done yet, so it'll show that that's still under construction, but coming in 2026, so that they know it'll be there. We will have a feedback form at the end of the tool because we recognize that this is a new requirement and also a relatively technical one that planners might not be that familiar with. And so we're always going to have our blind spots in developing the tool. We want to hear from planners if they're catching things that we're not seeing, or if they have questions that we can help better explain through the different modules in the tool. So we'll be capturing that feedback through the fall and working towards a January 2026 launch of the full tool with all of the functionality, sectors, and fun, fancy little side tools that'll come with it. Yeah.
Very cool. Thank you. Thanks. Further discussion on this report? Any further discussion? Seeing none, thanks again. This is just really exciting. Look forward to it rolling out through the rest of the year and into January, and to get the feedback from our partner communities. Very exciting. As is our next item, our final information item, it's the program development update on Small Communities Planning Program and 2050 Planning Assistance Grant Program. Ms. Merritt Clapp-Smith joins Ms. Torres to present. And again, I'll just say to committee members, this is something this committee and this council has been very interested in for quite a while, as long as I've been here, right? And so it's great to get to this point and to see how this is going to roll out with our Imagine 2050 planning process. So good day. Yeah, Ms. Torres, Ms. Clapp-Smith.
Merritt's going to kick us off.
Yeah. Hello, I'm Merritt Clapp-Smith. I am a senior planner in local planning assistance and a sector representative, and I'm here today with Angela Torres to talk about the Small Communities Planning Program and planning assistance grants for Imagine 2050. Today we're going to talk about the analysis we've been doing to identify potentially eligible communities. Specifically, we'll be looking at eligibility for the Small Communities Planning Program, as well as the planning assistance grants, some additional program considerations that are ongoing, and then kind of a proposed schedule to identify and confirm the eligible communities and assistance levels. So let's first review how we came to identify the potentially eligible communities. In each comprehensive planning cycle, staff and the council consider which communities most need assistance to update their comprehensive plans and how we can support them. And under Minnesota statute, it is identified that we can provide assistance to communities with demonstrated need and limitations on financial capacity. In recent cycles, the council has offered invaluable support through direct planning assistance grants to a subset of regional communities based on eligibility criteria it identifies for the communities with the greatest need. And each cycle we learn more about who most needs the assistance and why, and update the eligibility criteria accordingly. Reflecting on the 2050 planning experience, we posed the question of need to council colleagues, community planners, and planning consultants who worked with many different types of communities during the 2040 cycle. And their answers were very consistent in identifying population, that's current population, and financial capacity as the biggest determinants of need. After identifying the potential criteria, we tested different thresholds and combinations of criteria that would better serve smaller and financially constrained communities with grants and direct service under the new Small Communities Planning Program. In the third step, we evaluated who would be served by the revised criteria compared to the 2040 grant cycle. And in consultation with the Land Use Advisory Committee, we set criteria to provide about the same number of grants as we had during the 2040 planning cycle. And at that time, we served grants, individual communities, we served 63. We had 2 county grants to Scott and Carver to help with the planning for their 21 townships, and we had 1 consortium grant. So under the 2050 revised criteria, more small and medium-sized communities would be served instead of the largest cities in the region. In addition, more inner-ring suburban communities would be served. These are places where growth has slowed, the tax base is often declining, but they have high needs around redevelopment planning. After input from the Land Use Advisory Committee in May, we've continued to analyze the criteria and eligibility. First, we addressed a committee request to look at if any communities were really close to being eligible. We kind of called it on the cusp analysis. They thought if there are a handful that are right on the edge and we'd tweak the criteria to let them in, we should do that. So as staff, we looked at kind of a 3% plus or minus for both population and net tax capacity per capita to see if we tweak those criteria up or down, if anybody would fall into eligibility. And what we found with that analysis is that the eligible communities list did not change. The second update we've made, and this is true since we've last met with you, is we updated the analysis for 2024 current population numbers, which were recently adopted by the council. And the change in current population impacted eligibility based on the population criteria, but also on the net tax capacity per capita, because it's per capita. So with those updates, we increased the number of communities eligible for grants from 63 to 68, and increased the number of communities eligible for the Small Communities Planning Program from 30 to 32. There is a last piece of really important data analysis that remains to be updated, and that is the net tax capacity per capita data based on 2025 net tax capacity. So the analysis to date has been using the 2024 numbers from the Minnesota Department of Revenue. I've been checking weekly, and it looks like they're right now in the process of turning over the numbers from 2024 to 2025. So as soon as that data is available, I will have to rerun the data for all of the communities, and we can expect that we're going to see some people come into eligibility and others possibly drop off the list. So note today in looking at any of the maps, this is the current analysis. We have yet to update it again.
Ms. Klopsmith, before you go on to the next slide, please, I have a question about the center box and talking about the change of ineligibility based on population and the tax capacity. And so they increased in both those categories, 63 to 68, 30 to 32. Are those distinct lists, or are there some that would appear on both of those lists?
You mean which ones kind of shifted as a result of the?
Or is the 30 to 32 a subset of the grant eligible communities?
In the case of the 2024 data, everybody that was eligible under 2023 data is still on the list, and then 2 were added and 4 were added.
Great. I mean, is there duplication between the 2 lists? No. Okay, Director Press, cool.
They're 2 separate lists.
Sure.
And there isn't overlap.
Great, thank you. I guess I wasn't asking the question.
Yes, yeah. That's an important point, because when we designed the eligibility criteria, we tried it a number of different ways. Ultimately, in consultation with the Land Use Advisory Committee, we decided to make them such that there would be no overlap between grant eligibility and eligibility for the Small Communities Planning Program.
That's what I was asking.
And no gap between the 2 programs either.
What does that mean, Angela?
From the smallest communities to the largest grant awardees, there's not a gap between the 2 lists where a community wouldn't be eligible for one or the other programs.
Thank you. Thanks.
Until you get to the higher population communities.
Okay.
Right. And under the current criteria, communities that have a population between 0 and 2,500 could potentially be eligible for the Small Communities Planning Program if they also meet the net tax capacity per capita data. For grants, any community meeting the net tax capacity per capita that is between just over 2,500 and up to 35,000 is eligible for grants. If you are a community that has a current population of over 35,000, then we're not proposing grants be awarded, because these tend to be communities that have the budgetary and staffing resources to better undertake a comprehensive plan update than the medium and smaller communities. So what you see here before you is the map of potentially eligible communities right now for planning assistance and the Small Communities Program. The potentially eligible communities for grants are shown first in yellow and green, with the yellow ones having a population under 15,000 and the green ones between 15,000 and 35,000. In blue, you see Scott and Carver counties, all of their township communities that they do the land use planning for. So this is awarded in 2 grants to help those counties with that comprehensive planning effort for their townships. And you see blue cross-hatching in the bottom right corner. That represents the communities that participated in the Dakota County Collaborative Grant Program in 2040. So a lot of people, they kind of keep wondering, who were those communities? what they might be eligible for this time, so we're showing that. And then lastly, in pink, you see those potentially eligible for the Small Communities Planning Program, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. So let's look specifically now at the eligibility for the Small Communities Planning Program based on the updated analysis. So this table shows the eligibility criteria that's been discussed by the Land Use Advisory Committee and seen previously by this committee. We have not updated or changed the criteria that we discussed with you last time. It is based on a combination of current population and net tax capacity per capita. And the number of communities we are currently identifying as eligible is 32. So this map shows those eligible communities as currently proposed. They are a little hard to see because in many cases they're geographically small. However, what you can hopefully get a sense of is good coverage across the region. They're predominantly more rural areas, a lot of rural center communities, although we do have a handful in the core, such as Hilltop, Lauderdale, Landfall, and Mendota. You'll also see that there's a cluster of communities that are in that area formerly, or in 2040 and 2030, that were part of the Dakota County Collaborative. And some of those this time around would be eligible potentially to participate in the Small Communities Planning Program if they would choose to. So communities, again, identified for this program. This is an opt-in program of technical assistance to update their comprehensive plans. They're not required to participate.
And Ms. Clapp, so just to clarify on that point, but it's not competitive, right? It's opt-in, but it's not a competitive program.
Correct. We identify the list of communities, we contact them all, say you're eligible for the program, this is how it worked, do you wish to participate?
Great, thank you.
So council staff will lead most of the comprehensive plan update work for the communities in that program. However, we are going to need assistance with the most technical elements of the plans. We will contract for professional services, engineering services, to assist with the wastewater and water supply plan elements, and Angela will be talking more about that. This will be a package contract. Every community is a little bit different depending on what type of wastewater it has, what type of water supply. So we'll have a group of engineers on hand, and the work would be done kind of in groupings of perhaps similar typed communities. The local planning assistance team staffers will work with staff from other divisions to address technical plan elements such as mapping. And if a community in the program has existing planning or engineering consultants, it'll be essential for us and any consultants we have to coordinate with them to ensure that we have the most current information data. So with that, I would like to say thank you and turn it over to Angela.
Thank you.
If you'd like, we can pause for questions for this specific program, or we can continue.
I think this would be a good time to pause if community members, and these are your questions that you kind of want to frame this conversation with, right? Or any questions or comments.
Any questions?
Councilmember Lindstrom.
I'm just curious if the eligible communities that you identified have been notified that they are eligible yet?
No, we have not notified them since the list is preliminary, and particularly since we have to do that update of the net tax capacity per capita data. If any of them watch the council closely, they will have seen this map, but we've been trying to make it clear that at this point, this is preliminary. Of course, the eligibility criteria and final approval for those will be coming back to the council, so it'll be ultimately a decision about, do we like these criteria and do we want to proceed with them? And after that decision is made by the council, that's when we would officially notify the eligible communities.
Councilmember Lindstrom.
Great. You mentioned that there's some new net tax capacity numbers coming out. Those numbers will then come out again next year and shift things up a little bit. I assume once you're in, you're in.
Yes, that's correct. And that,
Notify them next fall, like,
No.
hey, sorry.
we're like, oops, you're out.
You're eligible for a grant.
Yeah,
but
we're
you're
sending your
out.
grant money to someone else. No. And that's been true in the past planning cycles too. We kind of identify the most current data to date for the eligibility criteria. Those are approved by the council. We identify who's eligible. And then from that point forward, that's the list.
Correct.
Great.
Good answer.
Thank you. Any other discussion or responses to what we've been showing here, especially do the proposed eligibility criteria need any further adjustments? Yeah, Councilmember Chambliss.
Thank you, Chair Lilligren. Yeah, my question is, after we get the information on the, what was it called? Net tax capacity. Thank you. And if you have to redo what you've presented here in terms of who's eligible, besides the opt-in small communities, I'm just wondering who, I know there was research done on how to come up with the eligibility criteria, but are there some cities that won't meet the eligibility criteria because, maybe in the past they were late or they didn't turn it in for whatever reason? Who might we be missing? And would there be a process for communities that are interested to try to get in, or is it just cut and dry?
Well, I'll just answer on the data piece. So the data comes from the Minnesota Department of Revenue, and they calculate it for all of the communities. So the data will all be current and up to date and developed by the same standards as with the 2024 current population data. And so from just kind of a who's eligible standpoint, we set the criteria and then we have the data and the criteria determine who ends up on that list. I anticipate there will be communities that may not end up on the list that will be disappointed because ideally we'd help all the communities in the region, but the data kind of sets the list. Do you have?
Yeah, Ms. Torres.
Chair and committee members, inevitably, there will be communities that were eligible in the last planning round that because of new and updated data and how communities grow and change over time, aren't eligible in this round. And we do anticipate, right now, I think that there's about 14 communities that fall into that. That's because of a change in the criteria themselves, not only the data, but growth as a factor was more important in the 2040 planning round. When we did our research this time, that wasn't what communities were saying tipped the scales as to whether or not they had the capacity to do their planning process at all. And so the council this time has focused on population. It was a factor last time too, but this time it is net tax capacity per capita and population thus far, unless directed differently by you all. But once the council takes those actions to adopt the list, then we just move forward with the list. We also don't take into consideration like past planning performance, for example. I think you were saying whether or not they had met requirements in the past. That's not a consideration. It's purely just the adopted criteria that the council moves forward with. Does that answer all of the components of your question? I'm happy to.
It certainly does.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, very well, good. Yeah, please, Director Bras.
Thank you. I know that it can feel maybe a little disconcerting to have communities be eligible, say 10 years ago, and maybe not be eligible this time. And we had a similar process going from the 2030 round to the 2040 round. Had to get my decades right. Where, because we also changed the criteria in that round, going from 2030 to 2040, actually in the 2030 round where we funded very large communities that had larger planning staffs and larger total net tax capacity, not per capita. That was the change we made in that 2040 cycle. And we did not actually hear a whole lot of disagreement. If people did disagree, if communities did disagree with not being eligible in the 2040 cycle, they did not make a big ruckus about it, maybe mumbled about it, but quickly moved on, especially because the rationale is to provide, per state law, to provide assistance to those who have a demonstrated financial need.
Thank you for that. Sorry, Ms. Clapston, did you want to add something before I recognize Councilmember Morales?
I just quick wanted to say that while some communities fall off the list, others are joining the list for the first time, and I think they're going to be really excited to see that.
Cool, thank you. Councilmember Morales.
Like I was going to say, I think we have a lot more communities that are eligible this time around compared to what we had in 2040, and it's a lot more smaller communities that are eligible this time around compared to the larger communities. And correct me if I'm wrong, Angela, this is a non-competitive grant. If you qualify, you get the money.
Yeah.
In this case, if you apply, or if you qualify for the services, the small communities, planning services, you qualify or you don't.
Thank you. Further discussion, for my 2 cents here on your questions. Congratulations to staff, to the Land Use Advisory Committee. I know that establishing criteria, eligibility criteria, is kind of a movable feast, right? And you change something over here, and it changes something over here. So well done getting to this. And so I think this is kind of what we were thinking of as we talked about this over the last few years, getting ready for this, the 2050 comprehensive planning. So any additional analysis, just those population updates, right? That's what I feel like I need. And I suspect it's not going to change things too dramatically, but it'll be defensible, right? You have a defensible methodology here. And I think it's just, you've done a really good job. So thank you.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, another comment from Councilmember Lindstrom.
I think, if I recall, in our budget conversations, that we need some bodies to actually do this. Do I recall that correctly? And are we on track to get those folks on board?
Ms. Torres.
Chair and committee members, yes, it takes people to do the work, right? And yes, we've been working with not only our finance and budget staff, but with our directors as well. The plan is to hire at least 3 long-term, full-time, temporary staff. It's a short-term project, so as soon as we get those 30 plans done, that's the conclusion of the program until the next time around. And so we're hoping that that amount of planning staff will help to facilitate, that's at least 10 communities per planning staff. They will be those supported, not only as Merritt, the project manager for this program, but also the sector reps and the technical staff across the council are here and available to help in our normal roles, treating Merritt and the new staff that will be coming on as their consultants. We get calls from consultants working on behalf of local governments all the time. We have a little bit of an inside track on that, and so we're hoping for not only a great success in that, but a lot of efficiency that we can build because of how we are phasing this program in to complete these plans prior to the deadlines of any of the other plans at the end that are due at the end of 2028. And so we're hoping to conclude this program earlier in the year, and so hoping to phase over the staff capacity needed to support these programs as well.
Councilmember Lindstrom.
You might have said this, but when you said you haven't had deep conversations with those eligible entities right now, because it's still in the works. Mm-hmm. When do you anticipate this being ready to roll out?
Chair and committee members, you'll see at the end of the presentation, we'll talk about it in more detail then. The hope is that this eligibility criteria and the annual budget for the council. All of those kinds of things are completed by the end of this year, which means that funding availability, including program availability, starts in early 2026. And so we would start notifying local governments after the council takes action to adopt the eligibility criteria, and we would move forward from there.
Thank you.
All right, that is really exciting and look forward to moving forward. And it's fun and exciting to stand up a new program, right? And so well done. And now we'll move on to an existing program that we're updating for the 2050 comprehensive planning. And so that's the Planning Assistant Grant Program. Ms. Torres.
Thank you. We have also been talking about this program for quite some time. When eligibility criteria is developed for the Small Communities Program, it was also being developed in concert with the Planning Assistance Grant Program, which is why Merritt and I are here together. She's program manager for one and program manager for the other, but they're inevitably tied because of the eligibility criteria for one impacts the eligibility criteria for the other. So let's start talking about the planning grants. So this table shows the eligibility criteria developed over this year with the Land Use Advisory Committee. A community would be eligible for a grant if they meet one of these three sets of criteria. This criteria hasn't changed since we were here in May, similar to the Small Communities Program. The criteria hasn't changed, the data behind it has, with the update for the population estimates. The general eligibility, let me clarify. The general eligibility criteria has not changed. The population ranges haven't changed, or the metro median percentages haven't changed for the general eligibility criteria. I will say that we clarified, although it didn't impact eligibility, we did clarify the criteria for the county or consortium criteria, simply for transparency on who we really feel fits that need. So Scott and Carver County are the two counties in the region that have planning authority for the townships within their boundaries. That's statutorily driven. The county has, as far as I know, long been the planning entity for the townships in their jurisdictions. And Scott and Carver County are the only two counties that we really want to be recognized that they have additional planning responsibilities other than their own county plans. And so Anoka, Washington, even Dakota County and Hennepin, Ramsey, the other five don't have the same responsibilities, and we wanted to reflect that in how we were tweaking the criteria. The consortium is a group of communities within Dakota County that have, for the past 3 planning decades, done their planning work together. They have similar planning issues, they have similar community types, a lot of the same environmental constraints or conditions, and they have historically done their planning work together. There's a lot of efficiency in that work for them, and we wanted to reflect that we gave, they were eligible for a grant in the last round, and if they're joining together to do that in this round, we wanted to support that as well. The communities within Dakota County are most like the communities in Scott and Carver if we had to compare. They aren't the same even in the other counties. They're smaller. There's townships still that are really predominant all throughout Dakota County, and they're the communities that generally group together to do their planning work together. We wanted to also reflect the work that was done in 2040 and carry that forward, but be more specific that it really just applies, we think, most appropriately to the communities that have done that work before. So within Dakota County is much more specific. Within the rural service area, we want to make sure that they are like type communities. So would it make sense for, I know this would never happen, but for like Farmington to join in with the consortium? It wouldn't make sense. We want to make sure that it's in the rural service area, it's just the Dakota County communities, and that they are a group of communities working collaboratively together on their comp plan updates. So we did clarify that. It doesn't change the outcome. It doesn't change who was eligible or who participated in the previous round at all. But that was the one change that we tweaked to the criteria. That does create, I'm going to contradict something I said earlier, in that there wasn't overlap between programs. So because the consortium is not a requirement, communities do not have to participate if they don't want to. In fact, we have at least one off the top of my head, Dakota County community that didn't participate in the collaborative last time that still doesn't have their comp plan done. They are eligible for the Small Communities Program. If that's an avenue that they would see as more of assistance to them than going into a collaborative group together, we want to provide them that option. However, in the last round, small cities were eligible for more than one thing, and we're just kind of like no overlap in what you ultimately choose. If you want to be a part of the collaborative, you will be eligible through the planning grant program, through that collaborative. If you're eligible for the Small Communities Program and you opt into that, that's the program that you would situate yourself in. Now, you don't have to participate in either, and that's an option as well, but that would be a one or, not both and this time around. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yes,
Okay.
thanks.
So then in the next slide, this then shows what the communities that are eligible for the planning assistance grants. The only change from this map than the one that Merritt showed initially is that there aren't any purple, although Merritt calls them pink, there aren't any purple communities on the map. It's just the green and the blue and the orangey tan color that are showing the eligible communities. So you'll see some white in there that are actually eligible for the Small Communities Program, but they're not eligible for the Planning Grants Program here. So in the last round, grant award amounts were determined differently for several community types based on either the number of communities that they served or the amount of planning that might be required to complete their plan. The categories for the 2040 plans were sewered, unsewered, and county or consortium. So 3 different community types, different award types by community type. There were also small cities which we're proposing to support through the Small Communities Planning Program rather than through the grants program this time. And the categories are not proposed to change in the 2050 planning cycle. So we do have questions here. I can pause if you had any questions what I presented thus far, or I can move forward.
Committee members, see the questions that they're prompting us with. Any comments, responses to the questions?
They look good to me.
Yeah, I agree with Councilmember Chambliss. Additional analysis, I'm not sure. Maybe something will occur, but I would say yes to the first 3. Anyone have any pushback or anything to add? Okay.
I'm seeing consensus in the head nodding.
Consensus reigns on the committee.
Thank you. So we do have some additional program considerations for the Planning Grants Program that we've never done before, thus new, which I've defined earlier in the presentation as well. New means we've never done it before. Groundbreaking. Okay, so we have a couple of things that we're proposing to do with the planning grants as well. So one of the things that we're thinking of is how to incentivize different outcomes that the council has indicated a great level of support for, regional goals being one of those things. Our region is equitable and inclusive. Equity work is extremely difficult for local governments to often self-fund, and if we can support local governments integrating equity, different types of equity planning in their comprehensive plans, this is one mechanism, opportunity for us to do that. There are 5 different regional goals. We do find that climate and natural systems have other types of resources that we're able to provide for, like the tool that Jillian was walking through earlier today. The other regional goals are largely people-centric, and it's harder for the council to provide resources for local needs in that same way. And those are often what we've observed best led by local governments, and the best way to support that is perhaps through additional funding. So how can we incentivize advancing different regional goals? One way is to do that through the planning assistance grant program as well. It provides an opportunity to offer a financial incentive to support local governments. And the way that we are proposing to structure it is that local governments would be able to opt in, no penalty if they don't want to, and no penalty if it doesn't end up working that way, but to opt in early on to say, yes, we're going to do it this way, this is how we're going to do it, and it would increase their base level of grant award. So it's a way for a community to add to their funding availability in the way that we're proposing it right now. One opportunity, the council did in Imagine 2050 adopt 4 different frameworks for different within the equity goal chapter. And so equity can look like a variety of different things: environmental justice, anti-displacement work, community-centered engagement work. And this can be a way to integrate those frameworks into local plans, or a framework that works better for a local government adapted to their needs, focused on local needs or local issues that they're trying to address. So this is just one method where we're thinking we can incentivize different outcomes at a regional scale. The more local governments that opt into this kind of work, I think that the better equitable outcomes that we will see integrated at the local level. I do have 2 questions that I posed to the Land Use Advisory Committee as well when they considered this. Are there perhaps other regional issues that you might want to incentivize? What issues would your communities focus on if they were to opt in to something like this? And what level of financial assistance, in addition to the planning grant, because again, these are just planning grant eligible communities, would it take for communities to participate? Doesn't have to be those questions. Local elected officials are on the Land Use Advisory Committee, so might have different perspectives, but I wanted to offer the same questions to you folks as well.
Thank you, Ms. Torres. And I suspect advancing regional goals is one of the areas that has the most potential friction across the region, right? People view some of these regional goals that we're focusing on and the opportunity areas very different depending on where you sit within the region. And so I'm glad you've lifted this up. Committee members, any responses to the questions that staff has posed? And yeah, okay, Councilmember Chambliss, then Councilmember Lindstrom, or do you want to?
It doesn't matter.
Arm wrestle?
Right. Councilmember Chambliss.
Okay. Thanks. Just really excited about the new goal frameworks and the opportunity areas and what that might look like. Just looking down the list, I can see that some of those goals are kind of cross-cutting and overlapping. But one of the things that is a cross-cutting goal, I think, and that is community prosperity, because that is part of our 2050 Imagine priority, and where that's going to sit. Something to think about.
Agreed.
Very good point. Thank you, Councilmember. Further discussion, Councilmember Lindstrom, then Councilmember Carter. Councilmember Lindstrom.
You mentioned that equity and local government and being able to fund that is a challenge. Is that the basis of having this sort of bonus funds for this regional goal as opposed to the 4 other regional goals that we have in Imagine 2050?
Ms. Torres.
Chair and committee members, equity looks like a variety of different things and is prevalent in every community. It can look like a senior population. It can look like environmental justice and access to different regional parks, like we have in different programs throughout the council. When we talk about the climate and natural systems goals, those tend to have a lot of funding availability, not a lot, but more funding availability from state and other programs. Even the research and analysis and the types of tools that we are able to provide here at the council are different for those two regional goals. A dynamic and resilient region and as healthy and safe communities in an equitable and inclusive region are, again, much more people-centric. I think that equity covers all three of those, and I do think that it is one way to incentivize the integration of those three regional goals much more deeply and broadly than we would be able to in a planning tool or in data and research and support like we have for the other two goals. So my proposal is, or the proposal is just to apply really thinking about equity. However, I think that equity covers all of the goals in some way or another. Environmental justice framework, for example, supports natural systems planning, supports climate change. And so as Councilmember Chambliss was saying, they're cross-cutting. And it's intentionally been laid that way in the policy language as well. And so I do think that they cut across all. But advancing regional goals is something that the council can do in a variety of different ways. This we're just proposing as one of many. It's not the only.
Director Blas, do you want to add something?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just add to Angela's answer too, and she mentioned that these three goals are very people-centric, and that often requires a lot more engagement out in the field. It's not something you can do from your desktop. And those conversations, not just a public hearing, not just a survey, but actually getting out and meeting with residents, business owners, whatever that context is for local governments, can be costlier to fund. It's person intensive. It costs more to have staff or consultants or others out in the field or hosting events and thinking about how they can support that, but not just supporting those types of conversations, but then gathering that information, synthesizing it, and turning it into policy and action. That's it does require more than we can provide in our local planning handbook. As much as our handbook is magical, it's not that magical and can't take the place of those conversations. So that's really where we're thinking about how do we help support our local governments here that are already eligible for planning assistance funds based on these criteria that we're working on, and helping them do more than just the minimum requirements, but go beyond that as well.
Councilmember Lindstrom?
Oh, this all sounds great. I don't know what the right level of financial incentive to make it a real incentive. I do think about accountability. If they're saying that they're going to do this, that they actually do it. I'm sure they would. Most of them would. But we would want to make sure, like, you are actually using it for equity-related stuff.
Chair and committee members, we would have response, oh my goodness. We would have in our grant expectations for any awardee to do a work plan, to then do a report out on how they did meet that criteria. We would have to put some structure in place as to what expectations would be. They don't have to adopt the council's frameworks, but if they are, if they are going to do something different, they would need to propose what that would be. We would at the back end then have to evaluate whether or not they did actually integrate that as they intended in their upfront approval for the grant award itself. If they didn't, there's no penalty. They just wouldn't receive those additional funds. We know that council direction changes at times. There are challenges that may prevent one thing or another from happening. For the next one that we're going to talk about, for example, with early completion, best of intentions, and yet you may not meet a deadline, right? And so there wouldn't be any penalty, but there would be just not receiving of the funds.
Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion, Councilmember Carter.
I don't have answers, but I just want to fully endorse the approach that you're taking with the regional goals and the framework, opportunity areas within the framework, and the concept of incentivizing movement toward the council's regional goals. I also wanted to add that I think there needs to be a way of making sure that we're working with, in particular, our small community partners to recognize the application of the regional goals in a custom way. So I would rather not have 3 things, within these opportunity areas. And your question is, are there other opportunity areas? I don't want to point out that they've got to work on economics or they've got to work on, any one thing, but to have a bouquet of things from which they can choose and which they describe to us based on their data and our goals in a real live way, how this can help advance their community. If they are working on, for example, community-centered engagement, that work plan needs to be very specific based on where they are today and how it moves them forward. Or if it's, equity is so big that it has to be something within there, if they're working on economic mobility, what their community looks like and how this helps make that change. And I'm sure that's what you're going to be looking for anyway in a work plan, but I just want to reinforce that it's so important for these communities to recognize themselves and adopt a structure and a description, a work plan that moves them forward based on where they are today and where they want to be or see themselves in the future. So thank you so much for this really creative approach. I think it is a real opportunity, again, and I'll say this, for us to create the relationship of working together based on the community's needs. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councilmember. And I'm just going to riff off that a little bit, Councilmember Carter. And one of the things, the opportunity areas I'm especially interested in at this moment is anti-displacement, right? And because of our groundbreaking work around the Blue Line extension and the focused resources that we put toward developing an anti-displacement approach and policy, for me, I have seen that I kind of limit myself to what that might mean, right? And just I've had some experiences within my district lately where I can see that anti-displacement conversation is really starting to permeate more broadly into the communities. And as I think about it, there's something going on somewhere where redevelopment may happen or infrastructure investment may happen that we're impacting, and so we're displacing something or someone through our attention even and our investments. And so I really look forward to, as we develop these opportunity areas and define them more fully, what that might look like. Displacement out in the rural parts of the metro area is going to look very different from where it looks in my district, right? But people are, or something's being displaced as we plan or as we redevelop or as we invest in infrastructure. So I'm especially interested in that area. Like others have said here, I don't know what the dollar amount for incentives would be, but I do like the idea of using carrots instead of sticks, right? So, cool. Anything else on this slide?
Good job.
Yeah, Councilmember Lindstrom.
I imagine the incentive would be relatively small. Like if you're getting a grant for $20,000, the incentive is going to be 10% or 20%. Am I right about that that assumption? And if that is accurate, and you don't know exactly what the number is, but we'll have to have realistic expectations of what a community that gets an incentive of $5,000 can do to make their community more equitable.
Ms. Torres, did you?
A modest amount of money. Yeah.
Did you want to comment? You look like you want to comment, Ms. Torres.
I am in agreement with what Councilmember Lindstrom is bringing up. It would be a smaller amount of money. Obviously, we have a budget that we are developing and we would have to work within. And of course, the baseline planning grants would take up, a large portion of that. We are looking and haven't yet had I didn't bring the budget conversation forward with this conversation today, although if you look at the Land Use Advisory Committee meeting materials from the last meeting in July, we did not get to that part of the agenda. We started, and so they haven't had a chance to talk about. We tabled it until the September meeting. But those are definitely considerations. We do recognize that it would be a smaller amount. We would measure our expectations, but oftentimes a little helps start the conversation. It can start instigating a different method of really community-centered engagement that most local budgets might not be able to supplement. And also, in the same way that the overall grants aren't meant to provide 100% of the cost, this is meant to supplement some of the other efforts that local governments may have already wanted to do, but maybe needed a little bit of funding to initiate something. And so we're looking at small ways. I'm not trying to kind of cover up that it wouldn't be a great grand dollar amount, but small dollars can assist local governments in a variety of different ways. And we're looking at trying to prompt and incentivize where we can with what we can. We would bring that conversation as far as dollar amounts back to the council over time. The next conversation is planned for the Land Use Advisory Committee to take that conversation back up in September. And even some of the information that we provided for the July meeting, the conversations continue to evolve internally as well. And so we'll be updating the information that we'll take back to Chair Morales and the Land Use Advisory Committee in September.
Thank you. Committee members, at 6 o'clock, we're going to run a few minutes over. I hope that's fine with folks. We're nearing the end of this, but I want to say about 50 things on what you just commented on, Angela, and I'm exercising huge self-control and not saying anything. So let's move on.
Yes, for sure.
Thank you.
Okay, two more really important ones, and then, we can conclude. I did mention that one of the other incentive approaches that we were talking about, and it's really to balance the amount of work over time for staff, is incentivizing an efficient process, and that means submitting plans early. What that does is allows staff to be able to provide higher levels of service more continuously over the planning process. I will kind of say in December of 2018, the last time that comprehensive plans were due, the council received 72 local comprehensive plans in the month of December. Let's remember that doesn't include November or January, all of the, right? And so that is 72 comprehensive plans that all of the technical areas have to respond to within 15 business days. It's very, very challenging. Comprehensive plans are not small, easy documents. They are very technical. They're very in-depth, many hundreds of pages for a single plan if they're succinct. And so we have seen up to 1,000. Some communities really go all out and provide a lot of supporting information. And so we have to look at all of it, and it makes it very challenging. And so one way to pace out and phase out submission of comp plans and mitigate the amount of workload that causes for council staff is to incentivize an early submission deadline. I think it would probably take less dollars to incentivize early submission for some communities. And so, again, talking about nominal grant amounts, I think that we could accomplish a lot of this. Even if communities don't take us up on it, it would help us plan on knowing early on who would opt in to an early plan submission. It would at least give us some mitigation of that phasing approach for plan submittal.
Comments from committee members? Councilmember Carter.
I think that is good foresight. And I sure hope that we can do something in particular with those communities who are participating
in the local planning assistance or even the planning grants to incentivize with a small amount that early submission. And maybe the real opportunity is with those who are getting the planning assistance. We will prioritize their work, along with incentivizing their prioritization of that early on so that we can meet that early deadline. Again, I don't know what that number is, but I think maybe a focus on those who are getting planning assistance from us helps them, helps us, and also helps us to balance that work so that we can, catch the others that are coming in. But I would look at those in particular and really design a process of communication and incentive, an early deadline with those in particular.
Thank you, Councilmember Carter. That's a really good point. That's about 100 communities, right? If we worked with those that were within our grant program and our small communities program, that's like 100, right?
Actually, Chair and committee members, for the Small Communities Program, we're actually building that program so those deadlines are earlier yet, even than this program. And so those communities that are in the Small Communities Program would be, for example, due at the end of May. Okay. The incentivized communities that are the planning grant communities would be due end of August. And then you have the end of the year where the statutory deadline falls. So we're really trying to phase it over the year in many different ways. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
And I'm just envisioning a clock ticking, almost a sliding scale. The sooner you get it in, the more benefit you can get, the more incentive, right? And I suspect that a lot of our partner communities are going to be looking for additional, even relatively small pieces to add to their budget, right? So I think this could be a good era for creating this kind of incentive. Cool. Anything else on that one? Cool.
One last thing to quickly get your feedback on. As Merritt discussed with you earlier, the engineering service needs of the Small Communities Planning Program eligible communities varies. Right now, we are planning within the budget to provide engineering services for wastewater and water supply. That doesn't include surface water management. We do have some budgetary constraints, and so we're trying to see how much can we provide services for. We're just kind of coming up within that wall where we're not going to be able to cover everything. And that's not, again, you've heard me say it many times, it's not the intention of this program either. And so we're trying to identify how could we differentiate what a local government cost share would look like without exchanging dollars, and it gets complicated really quickly. But if the local government was responsible for completing their surface water management plan, one of the 3 of the water plans that they're required to provide as part of their comprehensive plan. The wastewater and water supply do tend to have a lot of technical, really engineering challenges. Local surface water management plans can at times be supported by watershed management organizations and other watershed districts. And so they are also on a separate timeline, similar but not the same timeline. They are due at the end of, I think, within year 27, whereas the comp plans are due in 28. And so we were trying to find what would make sense. If there's a different approach that might make sense to you, I'm happy to entertain all of this. We were thinking that if the local cost share came from the local government by them participating in the development of their own surface water management plan, not all of the engineering services would be paid for, but we would cover 2 of the 3 as part of that program. The Land Use Advisory Committee hasn't had a chance to talk about this, but it was the 3rd of my 2 another incentive program type of thing. And so I just wanted to bring this one to you guys for your initial consideration. I'm happy to take any feedback that you provide to the Land Use Advisory Committee when we meet with them in September.
Comments? Questions? Councilmember Lindstrom, I thought you would say something here for sure.
They still have to do the plan, to be clear.
Right. Is dinner one of them, or? I look forward to hearing what the Land Use Advisory Council has to say about this. I like the way you're thinking, you know, if you can cover 2 out of 3 or something, is that the incentive? This is very highly technical, and I don't feel like I have a lot of expertise to comment on it, but yeah.
I would just add.
Yeah, Director Ross.
Thank you. For many of our communities that are eligible for this program, potentially in this cycle, it is very similar to the communities who were eligible for planning grants in the 2040 cycle. That was at correct me, Angela, I think $10,000. It was not a lot of money.
Sure.
But still, it was, you know, we provided those funds as a council, and so they were responsible for covering the remainder of the costs of their 2040 plans, including if they needed to do the sewer plans, water supply plans, et cetera. So in this cycle, as Angela and I have been talking about this, we're like, well, we are actually providing quite a bit more, not dollar amounts exchanging, but in terms of the service that we're providing and meeting the minimum requirements for their comprehensive plan, we are providing more than $10,000 worth of services here. So we want to recognize that local governments do actually have a responsibility under the law to go through and do their plans and adopt them locally. So it's almost like having their own skin in the game, if you will.
Sure. Makes sense. Anything else from the committee? Ms. Torres.
I probably abbreviated my conversation on that too much, sorry about that. Just for transparency and clarity, I did provide a proposed schedule of when the conversations will be in front of the Land Use Advisory Committee and what those conversations include, when the CDC would have items for their consideration in front of them, as well as the Met Council through the end of this year. I won't walk through for time on each of those things, but there are different elements that will come before you at different times. The award criteria, the eligibility criteria will come before you first. At the last Land Use Advisory Committee in July, they did indicate comfort with moving forward with a business item in September on the eligibility criteria. Not having heard any changes from you guys tonight, we'll carry that forward for the Land Use Advisory Committee to make a recommendation on those that specific eligibility criteria for these two programs in September. That'll come back to you then in early October, and then move forward to the council after your action. There are other things that the Land Use Advisory Committee is still has under consideration. They were comfortable with the 3 award types of sewered, unsewered, and county and consortium, so that seems very consistent, but the distribution and the priorities of the funding will start leaning more towards specific budgetary conversations, and we'll build that out for them in September. And then those conversations ultimately will, of course, come back to you for consideration, hopefully by the end of this year, though, with the program components all being accepted by the Met Council, so that we can start making funding and programs available for local governments in early 2026 after the conclusion of the system statement dispute period. So we're kind of lining everything up along those timelines. So
Very cool. Any more questions or discussion from the committee? Look forward to seeing this schedule play out. Congratulations on this incredible work. Our thanks to the Land Use Advisory Committee for their work on this as well. And yeah, very exciting era. Cool.
I appreciate all of your support.
Yeah, no, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Cool. Michelle, anything for the committee? No, thank you. All right, thank you. Director? No? All right. Seeing no further business before this committee, we're adjourned.